The 17-member Metropolitan Governance Task Force met 15 times over 6 months, with an additional 4 meetings devoted to public listening sessions. Joining me now to assess the success of the task force is the co-chair of the group, Senator Eric Pratt. Thank you for joining me.
Nice to be here.
This task force was not the first to look at restructuring the Met Council, but it was the first to come from the legislature with significant participation from lawmakers. How would you rate its success?
You know, I think I'd give us about a B minus maybe. We dove into a lot of issues around not only regional governance for our metropolitan area, but looking at how other regions do it. And other task forces have done it, but I think having legislators on the committee gives us a little bit more ownership.
While there was not unanimous agreement on how to solve the problem, there was consensus on the problem. The report states that, quote, accountability is the basic issue. How might the legislature make clear to the public and to state and local governments ways of making the council more accountable?
You know, as I've looked back at the history, accountability has always been an issue with the Met Council. It started off with staggered terms appointed by the governor. And the idea was, well, it's not accountable to anyone, so let's make it accountable to the governor. Now, there's a problem in that we believe that the Met Council is accountable to the governor and not to the communities it serves. And so I think allowing our communities to have a greater voice in regional governance, in regional strategy, but also to be able to manage their own communities better with maybe less oversight, fewer directives, I think would be a good start. And then looking at the scope of the Met Council and seeing where we need a regional focus versus a community focus.
In the end, the task force put forward 6 separate governance reform proposals, 1 by Senator Scott Dibble, 2 by you, and 3 more by other members of the task force. But there are also submissions by individual members in an appendix. Does this exemplify the difficulty of reaching a consensus?
It really is a complex issue when you start digging into it. How large should the Met Council be? What kind of authority should it have? There were some members that thought it should be a full-time Met Council and we should give it more authority. There were some members that thought we should be taking authority and narrowing the scope of Met Council. A lot of discussions around transit and whether operating Metro Transit and being the planning organization for our transit systems gives the Met Council a conflict of interest. All those were things we talked about, but we never quite resolved, and one of the reasons why I give our task force a B.
Both of your proposals are centered on a COG approach, a Council of Governments. What does that mean, and why is that an attractive approach?
So a Council of Governance means that you have local communities sending a rep that they choose on their behalf to represent them on the regional council. Denver, for example, has 1 representative from each city and 1 representative from each county, making up a 58-member board. Our Met Council at 17, when you look at it comparatively, is really small. And so, but I think the point that 4 of the 6 proposals had some version of a Council of Governments shows that we believe cities and counties are key constituents of the Metropolitan Council that haven't been represented very well.
And so then that gets the voices of the people closer to the decision making.
Right. Your cities and counties have a seat at the table.
In the committee, in media reports, and in the minority report that is included with the task force report, you have mentioned the discrepancy in perception between urban and suburban communities. Can you elaborate on what you're talking about?
You know, out in it seemed like when we did the urban, we did a listening session in St. Paul and in Minneapolis. And the talk was about how the Metropolitan Council is affecting individuals. When you get out to the suburbs, we did one in Lake Elmo and one in Shakopee. It was more about the fact that we're growing and we're seeing overreach from the Met Council affecting our plans. Lake Elmo was one that I thought was really interesting, where the Met Council was demanding certain density and development goals, but the DNR won't give them the water permits in order to make the development happen. And so now we have 2 state agencies in conflict. And that's something that I'm hoping with the Council of Governments, with everyone having a seat at the table, can get resolved. And so it seems like the urban members have a more personal relationship with the Met Council, where the suburban members, it's more of a city-county relationship with the Met Council.
And you would like to see then a solution that gives more voice to suburban communities?
I don't know that it's not necessarily about giving more voice to suburban communities. It's about having Met Council representatives closer to the communities that they serve. So in my proposal, we expand the Met Council from 17 to 40. We have one rep from each county, and then we have 33 distributed proportional count districts that would then serve. The idea there being cities and counties cities can come together, and townships, and choose who they want representing their voice on the Met Council for their region. We already have city councilmen and township supervisors that were elected to represent their communities. Now they should be able to represent their communities on the Metropolitan Council.
Senator Scott Dibble, who's the DFL chair of the Senate Transportation Committee, his proposal is a hybrid approach, and thank you for outlining your proposal there. It would reform the Met Council into two separate bodies, a Metropolitan Regional Civic Council that is elected, and a Council of Governments comprising locally elected officials and appointees who are selected by a caucus of their peers. Briefly, what is your main concern with this approach?
Well, I think there's a couple of concerns. First of all, I think Senator Dibble was being very innovative when he put this together. 16 elected Met Council reps is about the same number of proportional districts we have today. Every Met Council rep represents about 2.5 Senate districts. And the question would be, can they really effectively be in touch with their communities with a district that large? Anything dealing with an elected Met Council, you start talking about partisanship. We can call it a nonpartisan election, a nonpartisan seat, but we're seeing party politics creep into local elections all the time. And when you look at Metro Portland, which is the only elected regional government, you start to see special interest money, out-of-state money flowing into these campaigns. When we want our representatives representing their communities, not special interests. I do think Senator Dibble's proposal probably gives a little more power to the elected officials than the Council of Governments, and I'm not quite sure how they interact when they share the planning function. What does that mean, and how do they do that 50-50 split? I think there's still a lot of questions around that proposal that need to be considered.
So that said, how would you like to see the legislature move forward based on the work of this task force?
So I'm going to put together a bill that represents the Council of Governments model. We'll continue to have conversations behind the scenes. I think there are probably some tweaks along the way that we can continue to make, but I think we have to have a real discussion, if not on the governance of the Metropolitan Council, and having our locally elected officials decide what's a better service for the city and what's a better service to be handled regionally. Maybe we can talk about some of the scope issues. I know Senator Dibble's been interested in removing construction from the Metropolitan Council. I'm certainly interested in clarifying or taking away the conflict of interest.
Senator Eric Pratt, very informative. Thank you so much.
Thank you.